Okay, so this video is going to be the second part of our topic of classification. And just to review, the domain is the highest level of classification, and there are three domains: archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. So after domain, the next level down of classification, there are 8 total, but the first two is domain, and the next one down is called kingdom. Kingdom used to be the highest level before domain was added about 10 or 15 years ago. So kingdom used to be as high as it got, but now we have domains. So the archaea domain has one kingdom, archaea. So if an organism is in the archaea domain, it's automatically in the archaea kingdom, like they're in the same group. Bacteria is the same way. The bacteria domain only has one kingdom, and that's bacteria. So again, if it's in the bacteria domain, it's going to be in bacteria kingdom. There's just one. Now eukarya, like I said in the previous video, eukarya is any organism that has a nucleus in its cell. They're eukaryotes. So we are in eukarya, but so are fungus and plants and these single-celled organisms that have a nucleus. They're very small. We are all in eukarya, but we don't have a lot in common, just that we have a nucleus. So there are 4 kingdoms in eukarya, and we get split into more specific groups. So here we have Protista. These are the single-cell organisms that have a nucleus. They're only one cell big, but they do have a nucleus with their DNA. So they're only one cell big, but they're still considered eukaryotes. So that's why they're in eukarya. But then they would get put in the Protista kingdom. Next is fungi, or fungi. This is fungus, so like mushrooms. Go in fungi kingdom. They are heterotrophs. They have to go find their food, and they're usually multicellular, but they usually feed on dead matter, like dead logs or dead animals that have already passed away. That's what fungus feeds on. So fungus, they have a nucleus in their cell, so they're eukarya, but then they reproduce differently than the rest of the kingdoms. They find their food differently, so that's why they're in a group to themselves. Plantae, or the plant kingdom, this is where all of our plants go. They are mostly autotrophic. They mostly find their own food. There are a few exceptions. They are mostly sexual reproduction, but there are some that are asexual. Pollen, like when a bee grabs pollen from a plant and then moves it over to another plant, it's using more than one organism to reproduce, so that means it's sexual reproduction. And then they usually, like they're autotrophic, and they usually have chlorophyll to make their own food. So that's the plant kingdom. And then Animalia, this is where we fit in. We're in the animal kingdom. And these are organisms that have to find their own food. They reproduce sexually, so you need 2 organisms to make an offspring, a baby. And we're multicellular and heterotrophic, so we find our food. So these 4 kingdoms, all of these have a nucleus in their cell, which is why they're in the eukarya domain. But then the next level down, they start getting split into more specific groups. There are 4 kingdoms in eukarya. Okay, so there are 8 total levels of classification, and there are ways to remember it. So the 8 levels are domain, kingdom, phylum. That one's, you want to spell with a F, but it's not. It's PH. Phylum, class, order, family, genus, not genius, genus, and species. You probably heard that one before. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And these are in order. So domain is the biggest group. So remember, domain would be eukarya. It would be us and fungus and plants and like fish, all those things all together, because we all have a nucleus. And as we go down, we get more specific. So once we get down to species, it's just humans. So it's very specific, and the species has only one genus. As you go up, they get more, the groups get bigger. So there's a lot of animals in the animal kingdom. There are fewer organisms in the phylum. There are even fewer in the class, fewer, and then very few, and then 1 in the species. So as you go down, the groups get a lot smaller, okay? Every organism that has been discovered and classified has all 8 of these. So every organism, a raccoon, a sequoia tree, a certain type of mushroom like portobello mushrooms, bacteria, any living organism has all 8 of these. And we may have one category in common with them, or we may have 6 categories in common with the other organism. It just depends on what it is. Okay, so something kind of like a plant, we're not going to have very much in common with them, and so we're only in the same domain. But something like a chimpanzee, we might be in the same family because we're very closely related to them. So as you go down, the groups get smaller, but the groups have more in common with each other. Okay, so here's the 8 levels in order. Okay, there is a mnemonic that is used to remember what order they go in. And so it's Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti. And so that's how you can remember them in order. This is how I remember which one comes in what order. Domain and kingdom are kind of easy because they're at the beginning. Genus and species are kind of easy because they're at the end. These ones in the middle, I always get mixed up. So I remember the mnemonic and I can make sure I write them down in order. Okay. Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti. You could also, if you like meat, you could also change it to came over for grilled steak, if you like that. That's just your personal opinion. I love spaghetti, so I keep it spaghetti. Okay, so I did an example of the levels of classification for an emperor penguin, and I wanted to show you what its classification would look like. So it is in the domain Eukarya. It has a nucleus in its cells. Emperor penguins are eukaryotes. So it's in the domain Eukarya. It's in the kingdom Animalia because it has live young. It has like its babies are alive. It doesn't, I guess it lays eggs. Never mind. That doesn't have anything to do with it. Animalia is because it is heterotroph. It has to go find food. It is multicellular and it reproduces sexually. So that's that. Chordata means that it has a backbone. So worms and jellyfish and things like that would be in a different phylum because they don't have a backbone. But us and like snakes and penguins, we all have backbones. And so we're all in the same phylum of Chordata. Then we get a little more specific. Aves, I think that's how you pronounce it, would be the class for emperor penguins. And this is all birds. So for us and emperor penguins, we would have the domain is the same. Our kingdoms are the same. And the phylums are the same. But then when we get to class, we are now in different groups because we are not in the Aves class. We are in the Mammalia class because we're mammals. We're not birds. So this is all birds. Sphenix forms, I'm going to guess is how you say that. I'm not really sure. But that's its order. Okay. And this is all penguins that have existed, either extinct or current. There are a few types of penguins that are extinct, and so they're included in that. The family is Phenicides. Similar. I hope I'm getting that right. And that is, again, all penguins. So a little more specific here. Aptenodytes are some of the larger penguins, and then Forsteri is the species. So the class, order, family, genus, Aptenodytes, and then the species of Forsteri. So the reason we have this many specific names is because there are different types of penguins. So emperor penguins are Aptenodytes Forsteri, and there could be like the chinstrap or like the South American penguins. They could have the same genus, but they're going to be a different species because they're a different type of penguin. So only the emperor penguin has this last one of Forsteri. And we'll talk about why that is next. Okay. So the more, I've already kind of covered some of this stuff, but I want to make sure that you get it all. The more levels of classification 2 organisms are in together, the more they have in common. So like with the emperor penguin, we went down the line and we were the same up until you got to class. And that means we have some things in common, like we're animals and we have backbones and we have nucleus in our cell. But once we kind of get more specific, we don't have a lot in common with penguins. We're not birds. We don't lay eggs, things like that. So we have some stuff in common with penguins, but not a lot. So we have a few levels of classification the same, but some that aren't. If we were to have more levels the same, we would have more in common with those organisms. 2 organisms that are only in the same domain do not have much in common. So like us and a mushroom are in the same domain because we have a nucleus in our cell. That's about all we have in common. Like we don't act or look or do much similar to how mushrooms live, which is good because we're only in the same domain. So we don't have a lot in common. So 2 organisms organisms that are in the same family or the same genus have a lot in common. So 2 penguins, an emperor penguin and like a chinstrap penguin, would be in the same genus. So they have like 7 of the 8 levels all the same, just that last one is different. So they have a lot in common. They're both penguins, right? So they have a lot of those levels in common. They're just 2 little different types of penguins. So they have a lot of things in common. Each level has fewer types of organisms in it. So the domains are big. So domains are huge. That domain of eukarya has us and mushrooms and plants and fish and like little unicellular protist things. It's huge. There's a ton of stuff in that. So genus is small. So that genus of Aptenodytes for the emperor penguin could have maybe 3 or 4 different types of penguins, not very many. But species has only 1 type of organism. So by the time you get down to that species level, that is only 1 type of penguin, an emperor penguin. Once you get down to the sapien, like we are Homo sapiens, that's our genus and species. The species of sapien is only humans. Only humans, okay? So domains are huge and species, there's just 1. So as you go down the levels, they taper down and you have very few organisms or types of organisms per level. And then lastly, we need to talk about scientific names, okay? Organisms are called by their scientific name. The scientific name is made up of the genus and species. So when you're referring to an organism, plant, animal, fungus, bacteria, it doesn't really matter, you call it by the 2 scientific name, the genus and the species. So the genus is capitalized and the species is not. So it's kind of like chemical elements where the first letter of the symbol is capitalized and the rest is not. Genus is the first word, it's capitalized, species is not. So for example, the emperor penguin's scientific name would be Aptenodytes forsteri. So this is the genus, and that's capitalized, and then forsteri is lowercase. And you just get that from the list of levels of its classification. Scientific names help us be specific. If we're talking about an emperor penguin, we want to make sure we're talking about an emperor penguin and not one of those other like African or South American penguins. We want the big tall ones with the yellow that live in Antarctica. Okay, that's a specific type of penguin. We don't want one of the other types in Happy Feet that acted like they were the chin strap and the weird penguins. Okay, we want like the real like penguins, March of the Penguins penguins. Okay. So scientific names also are the same in any language. So if I talk to somebody in Japan or Mexico or, I don't know, Kenya, I could tell them Aptenodytes forsteri, they could look it up. They know it's an emperor penguin. I don't have to know the Japanese word for penguin or the Swahili word for penguin or the Spanish word for penguin. Okay? All I need to know is Aptenodytes forsteri, and they can look that up. Okay, so we use these so that we can be specific and talk about a specific type of penguin. Another example is if we were talking about snake and we were describing like the snake that we saw or we're doing an experiment on. If we just said snake, that could be a huge python, that could be a little garden snake, it could be a rattlesnake, it could be a cobra. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of snakes. I would need to use the scientific name so that they would know exactly what type of snake I'm talking about. It's important because the behavior or the habitat of one type of snake can be completely different from another. So you want to make sure you're specific. That's why we use scientific name. Scientific name. Specific. There it is. Okay. Using 2 names to identify something is known as binomial nomenclature. And all that means is 2. Bi means 2, like biannual is twice a year. Bi is 2. Nomial is name, so 2 name. And then nomenclature is just blah, 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 system. It's just a fancy word for system. So 2 name system. That's it.